Welcome to our revolution, organized to win Washington. Welcome to our town hall series. Tonight, we are going to actually introduce you to a couple of our endorsed candidates. We have Christopher Armitage from Congressional District 5, and then Jason Call from our Congressional District 2 here in Washington State. As always, we are joined by Amber King and Courtney Love, and of course, our producers, Oz and Franklin on Uphill Media. Thank you all so much for making this happen. We are organizing a political revolution to challenge the power of the plutocrats and prioritize the needs of people and our planet. With your support, we are building a national grassroots movement of local groups powerful enough to win progressive issue fights, elect progressive champions, transform our political system, and get big money out of politics. Like I said, tonight we have a couple of our amazing congressional candidates in the House. In 1 second, Amber will introduce Jason Call. But right before that, I want you to watch this. Please roll the tape, Oz.
After my mom's surgery, as she was being prepped for discharge, she could already feel something was wrong. She told the doctor she needed to stay longer for observation, but the insurance company would only cover one night's recovery in the hospital. My mom eventually died as a result of the infection she got from that surgery. An infection that could have been caught and cured had she remained in the hospital for one more day. And do you know what the saddest part is? This is not a unique story in our country. Everyone I know has a friend or a family member with a story just like my mom's. Everyone has a story. My name is Jason Call. I've been an organizer and progressive activist for 30 years, and I taught in our public schools for nearly 2 decades. I've been confronting special interests and standing up for what is right my entire life. I've lived in Everett and Marysville for the last 20 years, so I know we're tired of the inaction from our current corporate representation. It's time for a change. Medical bills have become the #1 cause of bankruptcy for Americans. The cost of housing keeps rising while our wages remain stagnant. The climate crisis threatens the livelihood of our children and grandchildren. And here in the North Puget Sound region, the Navy growlers have caused an extreme level of disruption and pollution to residents and wildlife. We deserve a representative who will put our interests before their corporate donors. That's why I'm running for Congress. Our opponent gets paid a lot of money to avoid these problems, thanks to connections from his time as a lobbyist. He's not listening to our concerns and doesn't even live in the state of Washington. It's time working class people like you and me took our government back from the grips of corporate money and special interests. We need Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, tuition-free college, a guaranteed job with a living wage, and affordable housing for everyone. Washington is known to be a progressive leader in our nation. So why doesn't our representation share these progressive values? This is a choice between 2 futures. One where corporations will continue to reap huge profits by ignoring the climate emergency and denying people their right to health care and a living wage, or a vastly different future. One where billionaires pay their fair share in taxes, where our government isn't sold to the highest bidder, and where our children can grow up without poisoned food, water, and air. From Linwood to Oak Harbor to Bellingham, we have to be courageous and ambitious enough to meet this moment with everything we've got. It's time to send someone to Congress who will represent our story. Visit callforcongress.com today and join our movement. The day after my mom's
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Want to just acknowledge everybody watching in the chat. How's it going, Randy? Everybody, if you want to please hit like and share, make sure that our base is seeing these conversations we're having. Welcome to our town hall. How are you doing tonight, Jason?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah, definitely. So you are in my new congressional district 2. And I'm just so happy that you are running. That ad very speaks to my heart, my experiences, and why we all need to step up and take this plunge. Can you tell me a little bit about what made you decide to run besides what we've just seen in that video?
Well, I have lived in Everett and Marysville, as the ad says, for the last 20 years. And the current incumbent has been my congressman for that long, since, really, if we think about the longevity of it, he was elected when Clinton was still in office. Um, and for the last 15 years, I've been fighting as a progressive Democrat, I've been fighting against the fact that he votes with the Republicans a good many times, and in favor of the corporations that donate to him. We've seen a couple of progressive challenges, but none of them have turned into anything fruitful as far as getting onto the general election ballot. And as an activist, as a progressive activist, and volunteer for the Bernie Sanders campaign, Bernie encouraged us to run for office, and I really felt that 2020, particularly with the healthcare crisis and the environmental emergency that we're facing here, I felt like the time was ripe for somebody to step up and promote those issues. We even asked a few other people if they wanted to do it first. The reality is I'm very supportive of diversity, and if I win, we're replacing one white guy with another white guy, and so I was hoping that we could get a person of color to run for the seat. But the people who reached out to declined, and I had some local Democratic Party activists say, "Hey, you know what? You're the kind of guy that could do this." Thinking about how many people could actually do this and win. And so it really kind of fell to me to do it. I'm a math teacher and I'm an activist, and I'm not a politician. But then I felt to myself, Congress has got a ton of representation for corporations and almost no representation for the working class. A lot of career politicians, the incumbent seeking a 10th term. I don't seek to make a career out of this. I want to provide a service to my constituents. And I think now is the time for progressive activists to step up, and have our voices heard, really for the betterment of of the working class, of minority constituents, and a livable planet. Those are things that the incumbent is not going to stand up for. And so 2020 is a year to get it done. I'm actually very excited now that filing week is over. Myself, I'm the only progressive in the race, and then the incumbent is the other Democrat. So we've got 2 Democrats in the race, and we've got 6 Republicans. And I'm looking forward to the 6 Republicans splitting off the right-wing vote in the district, and being on the ballots next to the incumbent in the general.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited to see how this race progresses. I as somebody who's been, in this area and politically active for the last 5 years that I've been back in Washington, I can definitely tell there's a new tone, there's new faces, new people, and now really feels like the time to really make this impact, especially with considering our current circumstances. We really need leaders. I've been very disappointed with some of our local leaders who haven't made it to show up for very key important votes. And what are some of the thoughts on how our current elected officials have handled the pandemic, and how do you think you would do it differently?
Well, the reality is we've seen over the last 6 weeks that the very wealthy Jeff Bezos has increased his net worth $41 billion over the last 6 weeks, as people have turned to delivery services through Amazon. And it's great that Amazon can provide that service. It's not great that the wealth that is generated by that increases an individual's, already the richest man in the world, ends up increasing his net worth. And I was looking at an analysis of the 8 richest people in the country, all men. and their collective net worth over the last 6 weeks has increased $360 billion, and yet we can't even get our elected Democrats in Congress, Pramila Jayapal accepted, we can't get them to stand up and fight for recurring monthly payments so that people who are out of work, the 33 million Americans who have lost their jobs in this time, can pay their bills. We don't have people fighting for a rent freeze throughout this. And so I look at what has passed with how we on to 4 bills now. I look at what has passed and where that money is going, and I simply say to myself, our representatives, they are not fighting for us. They are fighting for that wealth transfer to continue to the richest people. I'm fairly disgusted with what has passed, and I'm glad that they could see their way to seeing a $1,200 one-time payment. I don't want to, but it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. And where are the people who are fighting for the working class? I don't see them here in Washington. Like I said, Pramila Jayapal accepted. We've got 6 other House Democrats who are all part of the New Democrat coalition, third way Democrats, and they are corporate funded, and that's who they're working for. I mean, that's my analysis of what I'm seeing from these relief bills. It's not enough, and really. And I'll talk to you as somebody who's looking at the platform of the Democratic Party. It's not representative of the platform that I helped write back in 2018. And I really want, we've got a good progressive platform here in Washington. If we followed what we had on paper, we just don't have elected officials we don't have any mechanism other than challenging them electorally. We don't have any mechanism to hold them accountable to that platform.
Yeah, it's rather staggering. Courtney, do you have any questions for Jason? Comments, thoughts on how things have happened in the last few weeks?
Well, I was just wondering, how, are there any specifics about your district that are impacted by the current representation? Things that maybe are highlighted in your district that aren't elsewhere, or as much elsewhere?
I think one thing that is, somewhat unique to the 2nd Congressional District is that we have Whidbey Island and the San Juan Islands. And we probably have more coastline here than any other district in the country. I have sort of tabbed it up in my own mind as at least 400 miles of coastline with all of our island communities and the 75 miles of the I-5 corridor that goes from Linwood to Bellingham. And so we stand to be impacted more than other districts by climate change, at least as it pertains to rising tides. The incumbent has said he does not support the Green New Deal. In fact, he has said words out of his mouth on record, the Green New Deal is not an important resolution. And it's kind of stunning to me with the potential impacts for our own district that he can be out there saying things like this when, we look at needing to cut carbon emissions by 50% by 2030, eliminating them completely by 2045. And that's at the outside. If we go beyond that, things are extremely dire, but they're dire anyway. To not be supportive of doing everything that we need to do to support the people in this district who would be impacted by those rising tides, because the other option in our district is once we get those couple of meters of sea level rise here, we're talking about moving a good majority of our population inland, and we don't have the infrastructure to do that either. So what are we going to do about mass transit in the district to help people move if we can't control our sea levels? Another thing that we've got going on here in the district is we got 2 naval stations here, and as you probably know, the U.S. military is the single biggest polluter on the entire planet. I certainly have spoken often about the need to not only scale back our military spending, reduce our worldwide presence. The military is not a jobs program. The military. I'm not anti-military, but I'm anti-policies of militarism, as Dr. King spoke about often. And so, that is going to impact our district. We have military jobs in this district. And so I'm always speaking about, with the Green New Deal, with transitioning to Medicare for all. Yes, there are industries that are and jobs that are going to go away. They have to go away if we are going to survive as a species. But part of all of the progressive policies are the just transition from one workforce sector to the new sectors that we absolutely have to create. Here in the second district, and I would say in Washington state in general, we should be taking advantage of tidal energy opportunities. We should be taking advantage of geothermal opportunities. We're sitting right here on the Ring of Fire. We're on a volcanic mountain chain, and we need to be tapping into that energy. And I'll tell you, as somebody who has solar panels on their home, and solar panels that were built right here in Marysville, that company unfortunately has closed down right now. There's no reason that we can't be a leader, not only in the state, but in the nation, as we transition to our new energy economy. But we've got to get it moving immediately. And, the incumbent resists that. He takes money from fossil fuel industry, from the transportation industry, from the military industrial complex. And it seems like the majority of his sources, and the pharmaceutical health insurance industry, it seems that the majority of his corporate funding is all of the industries that are directly resisting where we need to go for a livable future and a sustainable economy.
Yeah, we have actually a couple of questions. One of them, Oz, if you wanted to bring it on screen, is from Sharon Abreu. And she says, Jason, what do you think is the pulse of the second congressional district now? It's diverse, but is there a general feeling about how being represented or not? And then follow up, how are the growlers and climate impacting people here?
Okay. Hi, Sharon. Good to hear from you. We are a diverse district. We have urban and rural. We are actually not very ethnically diverse. 88% of this district is white, but we have working class, and we have middle class, and we have some pockets of wealth. Climate change, I think we're all feeling it. Anybody who's lived in Washington knows what our summers were like 10 years ago and knows what our summers are like now. We used to, I remember 15, 20 years ago, where if it cracked 90 for a few days, everybody was dying because of how hot it is. Now we're having summers where we have week-long stretches of 100 plus temperatures. So we are seeing that global warming here in Washington. As somebody who has lived in the state since 1982, we are seeing those impacts just with our summers year after year, and people are noticing, wow, summers are getting hotter earlier. So that's the climate change that we're seeing. But along with that, globally, we're seeing things like Iceland has mourned the death of its first glacier a couple of years ago. We're seeing Greenland shedding 12 billion gallons of water in a single day because of global warming. And although those rising tides have not caught up to us yet, they will do so fairly soon. And so I really think that the constituents of this district, being such a coastal district that we are, they really need to start looking to the future of what will happen to this district in particular if we don't act immediately to prevent the increase in global temperatures. Second thing, Sharon had asked about the Growler program. If you don't know, the majority right now of the U.S. Navy's Growler program, and what the Growlers are, is they are retooled F-18 Hornets. They're, carrier interceptor aircraft, and they've been retooled to be electronic surveillance aircraft. So, they are strategic for the military, but the entirety of the fleet is going to be housed here soon. I think we've got 80 plus jets right now, and they're looking at bringing 30 more to the area. And these things fly, as Sharon knows, because I know she's in the area. These things fly morning, noon, and night. And there's the pollution, the groundwater around Oak Harbor is contaminated with over 170 parts per trillion of these PFA and PFOA chemicals that will the reality is that groundwater is never going to be safe again. And all the Navy has done in the area is say, well, we're willing to provide bottled water. Well, so now you've got plastic contaminants with bottled water. And so the Navy's response to the pollution, but all that has been addressed with the noise of the growlers is we will do a study on the impacts of noise. Well, you know what? These things are flying at 130 decibels when we know prolonged exposure to 85 decibels causes hearing loss. So what kind of study do we really need? These things are flying morning, noon, and nights over populated areas. There has been an outcry in our district for the last decade about this jet program. And the Navy has said, well, the runway on Whidbey Island is close to sea level, and so it's strategic for our pilots to be able to take off and land in a location that would simulate being on an aircraft carrier. But the reality is we've got to get these jets out of there. And I know that's going to cause some job loss for the area, but the quality of life that has been impacted for area residents is, it's just unconscionable. We can't move forward with it. So I would seek to rehouse that growler program to a location that is, if the Navy determines that we have got to keep this program in effect, and I'm not going to challenge the military thinking on this, but we've got to have it in an area that is not a human populated area. Unfortunately, that doesn't do anything about the general pollution for wherever it gets rehomed. But our marine life in Washington State, our orcas, our seals, our salmon, they are impacted by the growler program. And we have, it really comes down to what are our priorities. The military, I believe in a strong defense, but we're talking about war toys here, and as we move into the future, we have got to scale back the military, and we have got to ensure that whatever military we do have in the future is as green as it possibly can be. And this program is not it.
Yeah, I know that children of military families have some of the highest toxin and autism rates in the entire country, most likely due to being raised in such a toxic environment. And, the cost of that, not only for the military itself, the VA program itself, but also the communities impacted by that are tremendous and so rarely talked about, unfortunately. So I'm glad.
I'll just note to people watching, I'm a military brat myself. My father was Air Force. He served in Vietnam. I grew up in England, near military bases in England, and I've said I grew up with the sound of military aircraft. I know the sound of an A-10 and a C-130, but what's going on with these growler programs is a completely different animal.
Awesome. So any other slides? It looks like we have some questions out there. We've got another one from Sharon and a few others.
Yeah. Sorry. Sharon's got, how can a Green New Deal provide a framework for replacing both fossil fuel and military jobs in the 2nd Congressional District?
Sure. Well, I would just, the progressive policies, whether it's Green New Deal, whether it's Medicare for all, these bold steps really focus on a just transition. We don't want to leave workers unable to feed their families. So everything that we want to move forward with healthcare policy and environmental policy is grounded in a just transition, and making sure that any displaced workers either can transition to some similar job. So we talk in terms of the healthcare, that 1 million+ jobs may be lost if we shut down the health insurance industry. but those jobs are there in a government insurance capacity also. What we're doing is we're taking the profit out of the system, and having the money that goes into the system actually go to healthcare, and we can hire more doctors and more nurses and more support staff with that money. And that money is just not getting sucked up into CEO salaries and stock and shareholder dividends. And so the Green New Deal is the same way. If we have to close down the timber industry or the fossil fuel industry, we need those workers in green construction jobs, building our new mass transit systems, building our new energy infrastructure. The jobs will be there. We just have to make the bold steps to make sure that the funding gets redirected and that we have the vision to determine this new future economy for our country.
And we also know Celeste asked, said she was really pleased to see that you received the Sunrise endorsement. Congrats. If elected, what ideas do you have for helping young activists make substantial policy changes?
Well, Celeste, good to hear you there. I was a young activist myself. I talk all the time about I got my start in activism as an anti-war activist when I was a sophomore at the University of Washington when we invaded Iraq the first time in Desert Storm. And I think, young people do get frustrated because they don't see that the political system, which is, you have people in the political system and they don't tend to want to make room for new people. I think that is something that what is different about the progressive movement, and that I have seen over the last 5 years since the Bernie campaign, is that there is always room for more people to join and to participate and to help. And so giving voice to the young people who are going to inherit this planet, who are going to inherit this new economy, I think is vital. And it very much frustrates me. And I know Chris will probably speak to this also or back me up. And I know I've heard the same sentiments from the other progressive candidates who are running, not only in Washington State, but around the country. The political establishment does not want to make that room. The political establishment is very insular. They want to. A big part of that is that they fear the progressive movement, because the progressive movement wants to shut down the gravy train that is, corporate PAC contributions, and all this money that comes into the consultant class. Running for office is just a big money business. There are a lot of people who are making money left and right just on the fact that somebody steps up. What do we have? 20 plus Democratic candidates. Well, every single one of those candidates is generating money for consultants and advertising industry and marketing groups, and lawyers. Progressive campaigns are not running that way. We are running bare bones. We want money to print our literature, pay a few staff people, and do the outreach that we need to do to our community. I don't have a consultant. My consultants are people who live in the district and are impacted by these policies. And so I would speak to young people in the same way and say, this is why you've got to get progressive can't get behind progressive candidates, and yourselves be progressive candidates, because you know what the issues are that are impacting your district now and your future. So I want to give voice to those people. I want to be listening to them and knowing that what I do as a politician, and not a career politician, mind you, but whatever I can do, I'm turning to the people who are going to be affected by these policies and saying, tell me where you want me to fight. I'm so happy for the Sunrise Bellingham endorsement, because that is just focused on Green New Deal policies and the transformation of our infrastructure to be sustainable and renewable. So I'm already in that fight with them. But I think that young people, I think that what we do as a movement needs to continually be expanding so that people are feeling like their voices are heard. And when we look at the 2016 election, 46% of the people did not even cast a vote in the presidential race. It is because they are not feeling heard by their representation.
Looks like we got
Awesome.
a couple more questions out here before we move on. This is so exciting.
So Sharon is asking, what do you think that during this pandemic and an election year, Rick Larson still refuses to support Medicare for all, even though most Democrats want it? And
Well,
I would expand that to even be more than Democrats want it.
yeah, you're right. I think the numbers are 80+ % of Democrats want it. 50+ % of Republicans are good with it. And, it balances out to somewhere around 70+% of people nationwide think that a Medicare for all program would be a good idea. People are going broke. People are going broke because of medical debt. People are not getting treatment because they are worried about what bills they're going to get in the future. And these are people who even have insurance. So people are paying premiums, they're paying co-pays, they're paying deductibles, they're going broke because they can't afford to go see a doctor, or they're staying away from the doctor because they can't afford it. And then when they do go to the doctor, they're getting these horrendous bills on the backside, even when they do have insurance. It's unsustainable for the working class. And when I say the working class, I'm talking about better than 50% of our population. So it is unconscionable to me, just on the face of it, to have tens of millions of people who can't even go see a doctor because they have no insurance, and to add to it tens of millions of more people who won't go see a doctor even though they're insured because their insurance policies are garbage, and they're going to go broke using them. Half the bankruptcies in this country come from medical debt, and we have known that for 15 years. Michael Moore put out his movie Sicko back in 2007, and he said over half the bankruptcies in this country are due to medical debt, and we still have not addressed that problem. So I would say, why does Larson not support it? Well, all you got to do is look at his corporate donors. And I think that is the reality when you say, why do Democratic representatives not do the things that are part of the Democratic Party platform? Well, all you got to do is turn around and look at where the money's coming from. Larson takes 75% of his money from either corporate PACs or other corporate sources. That just speaks volumes to me about why he is refusing to support Medicare for all. And he says a Green New Deal resolution is not important. I mean, it's just, I know a lot of establishment Democrats say, oh, you're tying corporate funding to the votes they make. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's ridiculous. In fact, it's insulting to think that, to try and sell some other idea. Of course, the corporate funding is tied to the votes that they're making.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Sure.
I appreciate everything. Any final words, anyone?
Looks like Schultze has a final word that should be put up.
Oh yeah, that would be me.
Here is running in District 2. He would definitely be an improvement to Mr. Rick Larson. And ain't that the truth, Schultze?
Yeah, I see $15,000 in Koch brothers money.
Koch brother money. Now, I've had some people say, well, he hasn't taken any Koch brother money since 2008. Right, because in 2010, we got Citizens United on the table. So Koch brothers don't need to directly donate anymore. They're going to donate through dark money PACs. And we see with Citizens United, Rick Larson has had his contributions from the fossil fuel industry triple in the last decade since Citizens United was implemented. And he has benefited greatly from that dark money. So he might say, yeah, we need to overturn Citizens United. I would say, well, where have you been fighting for campaign finance reform generally? Because you have sure enjoyed the benefits of the Citizens United ruling.
Isn't that the truth? Could you give everybody an idea where to find information on you? And also, just so everybody knows, there are links in the description, but we're going to let Jason kind of do a last little shout out here on how to get involved.
Okay. So callforcongress.com. I think behind me on the screen, you can see a little bit of my campaign sign. You'll see that it's FOR, the word FOR, not the number 4. Everything is Call for Congress. So callforcongress.com is my website. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can look at my issues platform. We have an extensive range of issues that we're fighting for, and you can also look. I am proud that we have probably the best opposition research team in the entire country. And if you want to click on the tab that says Rick's Receipts, all the money is exposed there, and you can see all of the companies that are donating to him. And I'm sure that they are donating to the other Democrats, but my research team has done the job of combing through those FEC filings and looking at that. So Call for Congress as a Facebook page, Call for Congress on Twitter. You probably don't need to look at my pages for too terribly long to know exactly what I stand for and where I'm coming from. I'm an activist. I'm going to Congress to continue to be an activist. I think that's what Congress needs. Fewer politicians, more activists.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time out.
Thank you.
Amen.
Good to see you guys again.
Yes. Oh, won't be the last time. So we're letting Oz get the next video geared up. We're going to have Courtney kind of take the lead on this one to talk with Christopher Armitage. He's running in Congressional District 5. That's Eastern Washington. Oz, you about ready for the video? Yep. I think we are. And then Courtney can take it.
I know. Hello. We're just waiting for the video. We'll be right with you with Chris Armitage from Congressional District 5, Eastern Washington.
Take the next left onto West 9th Avenue, then turn left onto South Walnut Street.
Growing up, I always knew that my parents were honest and hardworking people, but I still watched them struggle like so many families do in our community. I remember seeing the dread on my mother's face every time I went off to a wrestling meet in high school. We didn't have health insurance, and she always worried that I'd get hurt. Even at 13 years old, I knew that x-rays are expensive. Unfortunately, my family story isn't unique. Struggles like these are the stories of millions of Americans. People are forced to work multiple jobs with the knowledge that if they get injured, they'll have to choose between medical treatment or feeding their families. And it doesn't have to be this way.
Joining us now is congressional candidate for Washington's 5th District, Christopher Armitage. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
I entered this race because of the simple question, who do you want to vote for? My answer felt pretty straightforward. Someone honest, working class, someone who's going to fight for real solutions, someone who isn't bought and paid for before they even enter office.
I know that she takes a lot of money from corporations, something you're not going to do, especially from dirty energy corporations. So what has she been for the district over the past few years?
She's voted against the ACA 50 times. Wow. We have rural hospitals up and down this district. They were not turning a profit. They were losing money every single year until the ACA.
My father ran for city council as a 26-year-old and won. Later, he decided to take up a trade, HVAC repair, because he said he actually wanted to fix things. I enlisted in the Air Force when I was 18. Thanks to the military, I was able to earn a Master's of Science in Homeland Security and an undergraduate degree in Criminal Justice while I was stationed at Fairchild Air Force Base. While enlisted, I was provided with top-notch health care. But during my deployments, I had to help my family cover medical bills due to chronic illnesses. I remember thinking how unfair it was that I received quality health care while they were barely able to make ends meet because of things completely outside of their control. I'm proud to be running as a veteran. I served my nation on multiple deployments. I did border security on the Iraq and Kuwait border. I was a base defense operations controller on the border of the Emirates and Oman. My time in the military convinced me of one thing. No person should be required to enlist in the military to have the ability to pursue our nation's founding ideals of life, liberty, and happiness.
Our future's being sold to the highest bidder by people who will not have to face the consequences.
As a community organizer and activist, I've seen the value that can be brought to a community when there's access to a living wage, guaranteed housing, and universal health care. I don't want to vote for someone who believes the right things but has never struggled. I want to vote for someone who's felt the pain of working multiple minimum wage jobs, but still having to strategically decide which bills they're going to miss. We need someone in Congress who will listen to each and every voice and represent all the voters of the 5th District. Corporations have enough representation. I want to represent real people. the people I live and work with, the people I march alongside, people from the local organizations that are driving real change, the people who make up our community. That's why I've committed to running my campaign on individual donations only. Eastern Washington deserves a representative who is not for sale. When elected, I promise to uphold these ideals. I will work every day for you because you're the ones who put me in office, not corporations, not lobbyists. I'll be proud to look every person in this district in the eye, knowing that I'm representing all of us.
When I enlisted, I took an oath to serve our nation. Now I take an oath to serve Eastern Washington, because all of us deserve to be represented by one of us.
That's an excellent video, Chris. Thank you for joining us. And so you're in Washington's Congressional District 5, which is basically the furthest eastern swath of Washington from Oregon to Canada.
Yeah, that's where we are. We're up to Canada, down to Oregon, everything east of the Tri-Cities.
Excellent. And so tell us a little bit about your district. We learned a lot about you in your video.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful. Dr. Edmundo Aguilar, an African Studies professor at Eastern Washington University, was nice enough to make that for us. And just so grateful that he put that together. The editing, it was his vision, really. So yeah, we appreciated that a lot. Our district is pretty economically diverse. You go up, I've personally been to 25 towns within the district over on the campaign trail over the last year. And, you know, visiting towns of just a few hundred people like Tico, Washington, or Republic, and also Spokane, where 2/3 of our district's population is. It's pretty incredible how economically diverse the region is. We have a lot of different demands, from our vineyards to our dryland wheat to our suburban and more urbanized areas. And so that makes this an interesting district to represent. But
yeah, I have family in Elk and Deer Park and Spokane. So
we're endorsed by Deer Park Indivisible and Elk Indivisible, actually.
Oh, fantastic.
Wait,
Excellent.
Elk has an indivisible? That is awesome. Love it.
Yes. So go on. Tell us a little more about your priorities.
Well, while I talk to you, I'm also going to pop on. I just realized my Wi-Fi is off, and I think it's slowing down my connection here. So hopefully that doesn't disrupt everything, but I'm going to give it a try. So what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, your priorities, what you're hoping to bring to Congress from Eastern Washington.
Healthcare, housing, and jobs are the summary. Now, I know there's systemic things we need to address, like campaign finance reform, that are absolutely important. But I think it's also important to, you know, once you talk to enough people in your district, to hear what their...
Oh, no.
That might be the shift.
Yes. Well, I will fill in space until he can come back with us really quick, because I was actually having this conversation earlier today about the need for rural broadband internet. So, yay. Perfect.
Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yes. And,
all right.
And we can hear you. And just to be clear, you will appear slower to yourself in where you can see yourself than you will appear being streamed.
Then I'm going to take myself off of my own screen, so that way I'm not thinking about it. So I think it's really important in your platform to address, in the front, especially in the front-facing portion of it, to address the top concerns that you hear. And having spoken to thousands of people across this district driving around in an RV, and by the way, I get very car sick very easily. So it was just, it's not, the in-between parts aren't fun, but you know, hearing people's concerns. I've met ranchers who lost the family farm they've had for generations because their partner gets cancer. I've met people who are working multiple jobs to try and pay off medical debt. I've met people who work multiple jobs and are homeless. And so healthcare, housing, and jobs are just the top priorities here. The 2010 census had this district's unemployment rate at 11%. My opponent votes with Trump 95% of the time. And I don't even know married couples that agree that much. By most standards, our district has been failed, has been missed. Whatever policies, whether under Obama or under Trump that you want to look at, or under George W. Bush, we are trailing the country's averages when it comes to quality of employment, wages, available housing, and access to healthcare. You know, you can easily drive an hour in a lot of areas in our district without having a medical facility around. There are food deserts in our district, despite how much has grown here, particularly on the reservations. And so those are the top three priorities: universal single-payer healthcare, quality jobs with a living wage, and housing. No matter what, everybody gets housing.
That's beautiful. And when watching your videos, seeing you in front of crowds, it felt happy memories came back of crowds, being 2 months into COVID here. But how long have you been running for this position?
Since May 7th of 2019.
So a year plus a week.
Yeah, and it's not something I talk about as much, but I don't come from money or power. Most of the campaign I've been, we're currently endorsed by like U.S. Congressman Ted Lieu. I'm a member of Brand New Congress, National Law Revolution, Spokane County Democrats, Walla Walla County Democrats, Pend Oreille County Democrats, Deer and Elk Park Indivisible, city council members from 3 of the 4 city councils on our district, former Spokane City Council President Ben Stuckert, and quite a few other groups and organizations. But most of this last year, I've couch surfed so that I can continue to run the campaign because I want us to have real representation, and I don't think we can just sit on our hands and hope somebody else does it. So,
indeed. It looks like we have a question from Insight and Awareness. Thank you for bringing that up, Oz. What about the farm workers? How would you protect them during this pandemic with the close quarters they keep? Would you get them hazard pay?
Yeah, I want everybody to have hazard pay. Anyone who's working in any sort of a hazardous condition. The military gave hazard pay pretty freely without too much restriction. It's not something you should have to fight for. It's not something you should have to argue for. And that's really, what I saw in the military was a lot of great social welfare programs were pretty freely available, whether it was hazard pay, family separation pay, 30 days of paid leave, whether you were an E1 airman or a general, 4-star general, you'd get that same amount of paid time off. And so, absolutely. Also, I really wanted, as part of why we're also endorsed by AFSCME WFSE, which is the largest union in the state, and Teamsters Council, Joint Council 28, among a few other unions. And being able to ensure the right of people to organize, particularly farm workers, in a way that won't harm our farming communities and our rural communities, but will strengthen them, is something that's absolutely a priority.
Excellent. Thank you. And the questions are flying in. It's so exciting. Chris, what do you think? This is from Sharon Abreu. What do you think of expanding the GI Bill to provide robust retraining programs for a just transition off fossil fuels?
Yeah, the just transition is something that's really important. First of all, I support that. Second of all, I'd also, think there's so many more applications where, expanding things or recognizing programs that work in dozens of other countries or in our own military can be used to jumpstart our economy. These are pro-economic policies, and focusing on the just transition is only going to help all of us. You benefit by your neighbor having more money, by your neighbor being able to learn more skills. And I'll also say, the GI Bill covers trade schools. The average tradesman in this country is a 58-year-old guy. I don't have a problem with 58-year-old white guys, but I think they would also like for younger and more diverse groups to be able to enter the field. And so, that's something I think, working with our organized labor to pay for people to go to their journeyman programs is something that will help our communities.
Excellent. Amber, did you have any questions?
I had one question, which is near and dear to my heart because that's the kind of activism that got me started very, very young in life. And you have the Hanford nuclear plant cleanup mess in your region. I'm not sure if it's actually in your district, but it's close and obviously would impact your district area should there be, say, an earthquake from one of the 3 fault lines underneath it. And they've had a really difficult time with their cleanup process. And we had a new investigation from the feds this week that said that the $11 billion we've spent so far on their plan really isn't even going to work, even though there was a lot of opposition when they came up with this plan for the vitrified glass plant, that we knew it wasn't going to work very well. And they went ahead with it anyway, taking their contracts with them. And now $11 billion into it, they're like, oh, this isn't going to work. Now what do we do? And it's just one more in a string of, failed government contracts and mishaps, with ultimately people's health and the region's health and environment at stake.
So yeah, the Midnight Mines, I believe, are what you're talking about, where nuclear waste was disposed of. Cancer rates in the region, it's about an hour northwest of Spokane. Cancer rates in the region, particularly among our indigenous communities, are far, far higher than the rest of the country. It's a pretty direct correlation. And it's something that needs to be addressed, but it's another example of profiteering. Our government wants there to be wasteful contracts. They want there to be budget overruns. I mean, who would write a contract that says you can go over the term of this contract, you can go over the budget, and we're just going to keep paying you? It's corruption. We can address these problems. We can fix them. And that's one of the reasons that something like having the government handle this directly instead of contracting it out is so important, because we need transparency. If Boeing does something we don't like, if Boeing harms people, it's not like we can fire the CEO, but we can replace our elected officials. We can vote for people who are going to demand transparency in those processes. But this isn't something that's just a one-for-one trade-off. It's a demand. We need to make it every single level up and down ballot of our government. And so we've wasted a lot of money there, and we need to fund the proper research, the proper studies to fix the problem, because that's what you do. We've spent hundreds of billions of dollars building fighter jets, planning to build fighter jets that just never got built. They spend $250 billion, toss up their hands and say, what are we going to do? We have the resources. We're able to address it. We have the intelligence. We have the work ethic. Plus, that's more jobs for people. And I consider myself, I think it's so important when talking about these issues that we talk about how the obstacle is the way. When I travel up and down this district, people tell me, sure, I want clean air and water, but not at the expense of my jobs or my take-home pay with increased taxes. They feel like anytime we want to do something to help the environment or get rid of hazardous materials, it has to be at their expense. They have to lose jobs or pay more in taxes. No, we have the resources we need. We can address these problems. We can create more jobs, better jobs, and we can lessen the revenue generation load of working class Americans by addressing them. The obstacle is the way. By addressing these problems, we get to make ourselves stronger.
And I know Sharon was wondering how climate has impacted your district.
Well, I'll tell you that the Walla Walla Valley is 400 feet above sea level. And when I speak to farmers down there, they tell me they can feel the impact. They can see it. It's a real problem that they have. They feel the effects of climate change more closely, and it's something they want to address. Not only that, a lot of Green New Deal policies are policies that they believe will help them. They've been having less and less total time of winter in the last few years. We're talking about just a few weeks of official winter in these areas where they used to 10 years ago have months of winter like you were supposed to. Not only that, the seasons are shifting. So just last year, a lot of our farmers in the Walla Walla Valley needed a bailout because they were holding on to their grape crops so that they'd be juicier and make better wine. Well, they got hit with an early frost that they weren't expecting, caused massive devastation to their crops. And so the seasons are shifting, their duration is changing. And we need to be there for our farming communities. They recognize that the free market isn't going to fix that.
It's only over the last few years that my father has had to push snow off his roof because of the weight of the snow on his roof. So winters might be shorter, but it sounds like the snow is getting deeper.
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's more extreme weather. So it's not just that it's getting warmer. You'll get hit with a surprise massive snowstorm when it used to be more even. And that's why, we call back climate change now, is because the summers are hotter, the winters are colder, and they're shifting in how often they occur and where they occur in the year. And that the farming communities need to know when things are going to happen. They need predictability. And, there's the Liberty State movement out here. People want their own state and all that. But when you talk to the values that make them want that, they want independence. They want what amounts to a decentralized supply chain. They want to not need to rely on other regions for goods and services. And that's reasonable. How do we do it? We invest in small farms. We have a few a few manufacturers in this country, a few farms, a few companies that are responsible for 70 to 80% of our pork and chicken and beef. That's not a decentralized supply chain. You get something gumming up the works, that puts all of us at risk. That's a national security threat.
Might be happening. Just might.
Well, I agree. We need to invest in small farms across the board, decentralize our massive food system, and install regulation that protects our environment while creating abundance. I'm a big fan of permaculture. Just going to drop that here. Let's see. We have another question from Celeste. I think you said medical facilities are far between in CD5. Our community, I'm sorry, Oz, I can't read. Our community health center is something you value, and what kind of access to reproductive health care is available to women in your district?
Well, we've only had one or two facilities closed in the last few years, a notable one being the Deer Park Medical Facility. But that was a nice go-between for the hour span you have between Chewelah and the nearest Spokane Medical Facility. And it was right in the middle. So making sure that we're investing, again, decentralization is better. We need to make sure that people have medical facilities accessible, that they don't need to be medevac to them, and that they're not going to go bankrupt because they want to live in a small town and they have medical issues. That's something a lot of our folks are really concerned about. As far as reproductive rights, Washington State's pretty solid on that. My opponent, our incumbent, they have said explicitly, Republican Kathy McMorris Rogers has said they want to overturn Roe v. Wade. They continue to spout the lie that they don't support, or that the government's funding abortion. Well, that's not what's happening. Medicare will cover cases of where it's a danger to the mother's life, or where it's rape or incest. That's what it's covering. Which even all but the most extreme pro-life folks and anti-choice folks are the ones that support that. But right now, those facilities, Planned Parenthood, shout out to Planned Parenthood, such an incredible organization, and I'm really grateful for the work they're doing. But like I said, my opponent doesn't believe you have jurisdiction over your body.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but speaking of that, so you are running against a Republican, so do you feel like you have crossover appeal? How do you talk to the people who would otherwise vote for her, or people who swing but have swung to vote for her in the past?
Well, persuading voters matters. And it's interesting because I told somebody that we have two strategies here that we're employing at the same time: engage with low propensity voters and also bring on board persuadable voters. Now, how persuadable someone is doesn't have to do with how far right or left they are. I've met some hardcore Trump supporters who can't stand our incumbent and are happy to vote for me. I've met some centrist voters who will never vote for me. And that's just something that's a political truth. And someone said to me, how can you talk to both those crowds at once? I got news for you. Donald Trump is talking, his campaign is micro-targeting and talking to every different subsect of society and trying to figure out what are their values and how can we persuade them and bring our message to them. And that's our job too. And we better be better at it because we're actually fighting for the truth. And that's part of what we're working on here is those persuadable voters. I want them to know a few things. One, I'm a very pro-gun person. I'm a former first responder. I have a concealed carry permit. And my stance is, as soon as we have universal single-payer healthcare, as soon as we have a demilitarized police force, as soon as we have a lot of other things, I will be way supportive of, hey, let's tackle the school shootings issue. But you know what? Living wage, so many other issues. I got news for you. A lot of country liberals like our guns, and that we got a lot of other stuff to solve first before I'm going to start worrying about that, to be honest, because there's so many challenges in our society that manifest themselves, diseases of despair, as Senator Sanders talked about. And that's just one of those issues we're working. If you donate today, you can help us pay for the billboard we want to get. That's going to say, keep your guns, have some health care. Because that's what I want people to know. Because I've met I was riding on horseback a few months ago with a gentleman who was open carrying, and he said, he said, I don't want employer tied healthcare because I'm pretty much never insured because of the type of work I do. And so, yeah, that would be helpful. He said, but then he followed up, I don't want anyone taking my gun. I consider that a constitutional right that I don't think should be messed with. You know how we're persuading voters out here? I have a master's in Homeland Security, and I support repealing the Patriot Act. And that makes me immediately better on the 4th, 2nd, and 4th Amendments than my opponent who claims to care about liberty and the Constitution. Speak to their needs. We persuade people.
That's perfect. That's wonderful. And I think you're doing a great job. Thank you. We have another question from Insight and Awareness. The Farm Bill was mostly given to larger farmers, and they could name family members as managers so they can exploit the Farm Bill. Would you bring this up as a congressman?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing up the Farm Bill. It's one of my favorite things to attack my opponent on. The last Farm Bill, they bragged about so much, 70% of the money went to the top 10% most profitable farms. In what world is that equitable? In a corrupt world, because guess who gives her the most money? She doesn't have the priority of taking care of our small and rural farmers. My opponent voted to appoint a member of the Purdue family, the head of the Department of Ag. And what was his message? This is a quote. He said, get big or get out. That's who my opponent supports. That's what they support. You want your kids to be able to take over the family farm? The Farm Bill that my opponent brags about makes that harder. Makes it harder for you to continue to do what your family's done for generations on the property they've done it on. And we're going to do better.
Excellent. Thank you for your pledge to do better. It's amazing and astounding, her audacity.
Well, you know what? My opponent knows they can lie and get away with it for up until now. Contribute to our campaign so that we can get out there and pull such a strong performance in the primary. My opponent has to step on the debate stage with me, because if we don't raise enough money to get the yard signs we need and to get be the first campaign to defeat her in the primary, she won by 0.5% in the 2018 primary. We defeat her in the primary. I step on the debate stage with her, and I can call her a liar to her face, because if nothing else, she deserves to be called out to her face publicly, because she spends a lot of time hiding from our community.
Indeed. Yes, I hear that quite a bit. It seems the Republicans in Washington don't want to hear from Washingtonians. Odd.
Well, I'll tell you too, I don't think a corporate candidate on either side wants to talk to anybody from the other party. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Republican. I've been invited to speak to Republican groups in our district. Happy to do it. You're not going to get that from a corporate candidate on either side.
Exactly. Good point. Yes. And I, now that you made me think of it, you're absolutely right regarding the corporate Dems on my side of the mountains. Amber and I both. Amber, any questions from you? Any more from you?
Yeah, I am wondering how people can connect with your campaign. How can they volunteer, especially in times as they are? And what can we do to support you?
Yeah, any creative solutions in this time of COVID?
We are standing up a powerful text and phone banking program. The text banking, if you're someone with anxiety, we have a lot of folks with anxiety who don't want to call strangers. That's okay. The text banking is really easy. You just press buttons, and you can forward responses to us, and our team will, if you get some challenging or problematic or inappropriate responses, we can address those. But it's a really helpful engagement tool. Our campaign sends 15 to 20,000 text messages a week, and we want to up that. The O'Rourke Senate campaign was texted. They estimated they texted every person in Texas 10 times by the time the election came up. And that's the kind of outreach we need. So you can sign up to volunteer on our website. It's armitageforcongress.com, ARMITAGEFOR, congress.com. Chip in a few dollars if you can, recurring monthly. I was speaking to someone recently who let me know the couple of campaigns that they were contributing to. Think about where you're going to get the best bang for your buck. Incumbents don't need as much money from you. We can flip this seat. It's going to be a wave election, right candidates in the right places at the right time. It's going to be a wave. Help us get that surfboard underneath us. All right.
Awesome.
That's
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you to both our candidates for joining us, Jason Call in Congressional District 2 of Washington and Chris Armitage of Congressional District 5 in Washington. This has been amazing. And thank you for all who have been watching and engaging with our candidates and the show. Remember to like and share. And Amber?
Yeah, I was just hoping Oz could bring up a couple of the following slides that show how you can stay connected with us. We have some amazing events happening tomorrow. We have our statewide monthly call for our revolution. If you want to bring that large, everybody can see it. So we do have a weekly Sunday meeting, and then once a month we have a statewide call, which is tomorrow night. We phone bank every Thursday, and then we are doing these 11 a.m. community meetup and trainings, and they're just a check-in, how you doing, very, very casual, make sure everybody's staying connected and staying safe during this time of social and spatial distancing. So tomorrow night, we have our special guest tomorrow night focusing on labor and taxes and transitioning to green economy is Jeff Johnson, who is with the Sustainability and Labor Council National Board Member, and Shama Sawant, who's our Seattle City Council member, talking about Tax Amazon as well as some events and I guess I'd say local initiatives happening regarding affordable housing and climate options. So very excited to have them both join us. Hope you can join in tomorrow night, 7:30. And I hope you guys can support Uphill Media. We have some links. We are now being also featured on Rockfin, and we'll be uploading some premium content there as well. We've got lots of new shows in the works, and we're just busier than ever. And after an exciting filing week, I'm so grateful to see everybody who has stepped up to run for office. It's very inspiring.
So exciting.
It definitely was one of the most wild and crazy filing weeks I've ever been a part of. And I'm just really excited to see the fruits of our labor for all the work that we've been doing over the past few years and months and cultivating and growing this community. There's a lot of room in it. So people get involved. There's space and events, things you can do, places we need help with. And just thank you everybody so much for appreciating. Thanks to Oz and Franklin behind the scenes for all they do. And hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Saturday night. And I believe Sharon is going to take it away from us.
Sharon Abreu, our live stream engager and local music writer.
Yes. And so this is dedicated to everybody who filed to run for office. May your skin be thick and your patience be strong.